Alrighty, we're gonna get started. I'm so sorry that we had some technical difficulties this evening. Hopefully we still get some good participants, and I'm sure we'll send out a recording after. If everyone could just start out by muting their microphones so Bic doesn't have any interference with their presentation. And then ask any questions that you have in the chat and we'll go through them at the end. And without holding this any further, I would absolutely love to introduce Bic Boyles as tonight's presenter. She is a graduate of Bowling Green State University, Bachelor in Science and Biology. She has worked at the water and wastewater industry for 25 years and started as a lab analyst at Alloway Environmental Testing Services. She later joined the City of Columbus Division of Water as a water research analyst and worked for 17 years in the Water Quality Assurance Laboratory. She then moved to plant operations and was an operator at Dublin Rd. Also did some work at Hap Cremean Water Plant, and currently she is at Delaware County Regional Sewer District, as laboratory and pretreatment program manager. And so with that, I will let you share your screen, Bic.
I'd like to thank the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for inviting me tonight and having me share my story. And I'd also like to thank the Young Professionals Committee, especially Annika, for helping me navigate through this virtual meeting thing. Just with my experience, I haven't done a lot of virtual meetings, so sharing screens, not my thing. But and then I'd also like to thank Ohio AWWA, OWEA, and everyone that's taking the time out of your evening tonight to join us. So I'm truly honored and humbled to be a part of this series. If you haven't seen the series, it's just been a fantastic series, and it's very much worth taking the time to see what everyone has to share. So in the process of preparing for this, I have to admit that I reflected on a lot of events in my past, and there were definitely times where I got very emotional. So I hope the sharing of my story tonight is as important to the water industry as it was for me to actually go through the process of capturing my story. So as I began thinking about my experience and how it related to diversity and inclusion, I knew I wanted a clear understanding of what diversity, equity, and inclusion was and how it was defined. So I ended up finding these definitions from Webster's dictionary. One thing that jumped out to me was that of the three words, inclusion is the word that's dynamic and it can be changed by any one of us. Inclusion is what every individual has control over with our actions. We can all add to an inclusive culture by our actions of respecting each other, listening, and being open to varying ideas. If we acknowledge our biases and give others a chance despite our differences, we treat others with kindness and respect. We build relationships to build understanding of each other, and then we can do more than just treat others how we want to be treated. We learn to treat others how they want to be treated. So I also thought of one more thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it didn't begin when I started my professional career. So I hope that my story can show how people's actions can truly make a difference. So I'm going to start the very beginning. So I'm a first-generation immigrant to the US. I might actually fall into a category more like a 1.5 generation immigrant because I was so young. I was only 2.5 years old when I arrived here, but I wasn't born here. I was born in Raqqa, Vietnam, which is a little port city in the southern end of Vietnam. When I was a year old, my family left Vietnam due to the dangers that South Vietnamese people faced after the war. I was too young to remember it, but this is how the story goes. Tonight, the night that we left Vietnam, my family started off on a motorcycle. My dad had to drive my pregnant mother, me, my 2 brothers, and my sister across town so we could get onto a small riverboat. So I went ahead and Googled it just to make sure that a motorcycle was a typical mode of transportation for a family in Vietnam. I wasn't sure how incognito we were actually being. But from the motorcycle, we got onto fishing boats that would progressively get larger and larger so that we could get across the Gulf of Thailand. My dad is a boat mechanic by trade in Vietnam, and he used his skills to barter our passage out of the country. During this trip, he was in charge of the maintenance and keeping the boats running, and then sinking these same boats as we were fleeing the borders of Vietnam by fishing boat. I guess we were officially refugees of the Vietnam War. So the journey involved about a week at sea with my mom and all us kids below deck most of the time to avoid detection. We stayed below deck and sometimes hid inside the live wells of these fishing boats. To this day, my mom still won't go out in a boat if she can't see land. So we made it to the shores of Malaysia, where we stayed at a refugee camp on the beach. The camp consisted of tents and quickly erected shelters and lots of people. While we were at the camp, my younger brother was born. We didn't have a plan at this point, and we didn't know how long we would be there or where we would end up. People from the refugee camp would end up going all over the world: Canada, Australia, Europe, or the US. After 9 months of not knowing what will happen, finally, my family received word that we were sponsored by complete strangers on the other side of the world, and our journey would continue on to the United States. We flew out of the capital of Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, to Hong Kong, and then on to Seattle. And from Seattle, my family and I finally landed in Cleveland, Ohio on February 23rd, 1978. Well, it turns out that our first experience in our new home was in the tail end of the Great Blizzard of 1978. So these pictures were also Googled. I wanted to make sure that there really was a lot of snow in the winter of 1978. So my sponsors will tell me later that when they picked us up at the airport, they were scrambling to find us blankets, coats, and proper shoes because we got off the plane in flip-flops and the clothes on our backs. I guess they didn't know what to expect either. From Cleveland, they drove us to a house in Mansfield, Ohio. And I can't even imagine what my parents were thinking that night. It was cold. Everywhere were huge piles of snow, which they'd never seen or experienced before in their life. The whole family just left our native country, and now we were stuck in a car with complete strangers that they couldn't even understand, not to mention the snow situation. So I think it was a pretty long 2 hours for my parents that night. So Mansfield became our hometown. We figured out what to do with the snow, and we settled in the area. Mansfield was not a bustling metropolis of Vietnamese families. We were one of only a handful of East Asian families. So over the years, there were families from Laos, Cambodia, and more Vietnamese families that were sponsored, but most were transient, moving on to larger communities after they securely got on their feet. We even had extended family get sponsored to Mansfield, but even they moved to larger Vietnamese communities that were popping up all over the country. I really only remember one other Vietnamese family that lived permanently in Mansfield while I was growing up. They were an older family that arrived in 1975, I think. So their kids were much older than me and my siblings, so I don't remember going to school or playing with them. Mr. and Mrs. Dong, they helped my parents with communication very early on when it was difficult for my parents. Now, when I look back on it, I'd say my parents are much better at English and communication than the Dongs were. So I think a lot of it was also very comforting for my parents to know that a Vietnamese family can live and prosper in the area. So there's not very many pictures of my family when we first came to the US, but here's a few with our sponsor group within that first year. That's me in the red dress that's being held in that center picture. And actually, if you look at all of the pictures of us, I'm in someone's lap in all of them. And it looks like we're still not wearing shoes. So the group that sponsored my family were the Mansfield Resettlement Committee. The committee comprised of members from various churches throughout the area. The organization had set up a settlement agreement for my family that would help us with expenses for travel and entrance into the U.S. Prior to our arrival, a 2-bedroom apartment was set up for us to rent, and a minimum wage job was set up for my dad making eyeglasses. His ability to keep that job, that was on him. So my dad rode a bike, not a motorcycle, a bicycle, to and from work every day for a long time. There are lots of people who are part of this group. Marvina Hershey, Dolores Lloyd, the Andersons, Mary McCarran, but our lead sponsors, they were the Nicklicks. They took the primary responsibility of us and helped us adjust, which wasn't easy because they couldn't understand each other. I remember my mom talking about hiding from Mr. Nicklick early on because he wanted to greet everyone whenever he and his wife came over with a hug. My mom, she would just wait until all these greetings were over until she would come out. My mom didn't want to hug men except for my dad. And I didn't really know this until my mom explained that she was very uncomfortable when she didn't know Mr. Nicklick. She told me she also felt bad because she knew he was there to help and was just being nice, but she still wasn't going to come out. But after some time, his actions really spoke louder than words. And the discomfort and the misunderstanding, it slowly really became understanding and trust. My parents always would describe Mr. Nicklick as a very gentle and kind man. And that's how I remember him. Today, both my mom and my dad generously give out hugs, unless you're a stranger. And then I still can't find my mom. So as you can see, we became very close with our sponsor group that set out to help us adjust to life in the U.S. They were our teachers, our tutors, and our mentors. Many were former educators and retired teachers. They patiently taught my parents English and tutored my siblings with school. But beyond that, they were the village that my parents put their trust in to help guide me and my siblings toward responsible adulthood because my parents knew they couldn't do it alone. I think one unusual thing about my childhood was how integrated I was in the church. This is interesting because both my parents are Buddhist. My mom's mother, my grandmother, she was actually so devoted that she gave up eating all meat. She shaved her head and gave up her worldly possessions for the faith. I don't think it's very common to have a household where the children don't grow up in the same faith as the parents. This probably speaks to how close our sponsors were with us and how much my parents ended up trusting them. They maintained our participation in all the church activities. We went to Sunday service, vacation Bible school, participated in choir and youth groups. I got confirmed and baptized in the church. During this time at home, we still had a sitting Buddha on an altar to honor my ancestors and a lucky Buddha statue wishing us prosperity. And I think for a while, there was even a small picture of Jesus on the memorial next to Buddha. So I once asked my mom why she was okay with us being Christians when she and my dad clearly were not. They could have brought us up in any religion, and they could have really a religion that they knew and understood. But instead, they encouraged our journey with the church. My mom said that as parents, they wanted us to grow up and be able to make decisions that were right from wrong and treat people with kindness and respect. When she thought of the church, she thought of these people around us, our sponsors. They were in the church and they were good people. So she felt that they were the examples that we needed to be around to help guide us towards being good, responsible adults. So I think of this conversation. I think of it to remind myself to be open-minded. Sometimes the goals that we envision, they can be achieved in different ways. So our sponsors are like family to us. We celebrated holidays together, both US and Vietnamese. Birthdays and graduations, they were there for all of it. Every milestone, success, and failure, they stood by my family. And on May 9th, 1986, they were there to proudly witness the moment when we got our U.S. citizenship. It seemed to be very fitting that we would all share this milestone in the city where it all began, Cleveland, Ohio. So this black and white picture was in the Mansfield News Journal in 1986, recognizing our new citizenship status. The picture next to it is my dad standing beside a bookcase he built specifically to keep one of our most prized possessions, a set of World Book encyclopedias. These were gifted to us from our sponsors after we got our citizenship. And in the News Journal picture, we're all holding these books. My siblings and I are in the front row. I'm the one on the left. At the back is the World Book rep, our tutor, Mary, my mom also holding a book, and Pastor Daly. I'm pretty sure my dad was working that day. Those books, they had the gold edge pages and everything. They would see a lot of use from the five of us. At the time, they were the most advanced source for finding all the information in the world. And this was before Google and Siri could tell me all the answers. And then the internet was invented. And I was just a regular kid trying to find my purpose and my way through life. So I think I was influenced by a lot of the educators around me while I was growing up. I think I wanted to be a teacher. And so in 1993, I went to Bowling Green State University intending to major in education. After 2 semesters of biology with Dr. Thibault, I decided to focus on science and declared biology as my major. He made it very relatable, fun, and interesting. Besides, I was also pretty shy and hated being in front of class, so I couldn't really see myself teaching. I found that the labs were where I really connected with learning. And biology offered a lot of different paths that I could take. I spent a semester volunteering in the lab with Dr. Helen Michaels in her research project. We were sequencing DNA of endangered geraniums found only in Hawaii. I had no chance, but I did hope of going to Hawaii. I found the work was challenging, but also pretty tedious. I don't think I was really ready to be doing PCR work. And honestly, I just had no idea what I was doing. But I thought it was cool to be part of preserving a plant that was endangered and could only be found in Hawaii. So I decided I wanted to be a plant biologist, or even better, a horticulturist. I loved gardening and being outdoors. There's just something therapeutic about having soil between my fingers and seeing everything grow. I did 2 summers as a greenhouse intern. I worked at Kingwood Center in Mansfield that first summer. I always loved the colorful formal gardens and the plant displays. That summer, I learned what it took to get those flower beds to look so perfect and beautiful. But I also learned how wasteful it could be to get those same beds ready for the next season's display. I then followed it up with a summer in Oberlin at Green Circle Growers, where I spent my days planting, watering, and just moving around hundreds. It felt like thousands of plants that would later be sold in retail stores all over the country. So I've always heard that if you choose a job doing what you love, then you'll never work another day in your life. I do love gardening, but working with plants like that, it just wasn't for me. It just made me not really want to spend any time in the garden. So those summers really took the joy out of gardening for me. So from there, I pivoted away from horticulture, but still wanted to work outside in the environment. And that's why my 3rd internship was with Alloway. When I think of my career in water, which now somehow has spanned 25 years, these 3 employers pretty much outlined it for me. They each have been, and they continue to be very important in shaping my professional career. So my senior year at BG, I found my way to an internship at Alloway Environmental Testing Services in Mansfield. So I've always enjoyed the labs in college, and it seemed like it might be a good fit. After all, it is in the name, right? Environment and testing. Well, it was a great fit. I really liked doing the work, and it turned out that I wasn't too bad at it either. So John Hoffman, he would take a chance on me, hiring me first as an intern, and then as an analyst right out of college. and unbeknownst to me, he'll also be a long-lasting professional contact of mine all these years later. I think Alloway was the job where I first recognized that my quirks were actually more like strengths. They weren't just nerdy behaviors to shy away from. It was okay to be methodical and particular and to scrutinize little details. I felt it was good to know limits and ranges for results, how to do things were clear with procedures, and set rules to follow. Compliance testing, it really made sense to me. It seemed so necessary, and my work was contributing to a greater good, to helping the environment. So all the things that Alloway represented at that point in my career, there will always be one thing that only Alloway can have credit for, and that's meeting this guy in the picture, Jeff. So while I was working at Alloway, he was the lead field and bioassay analyst. We spent a lot of time working together and got to know each other. So we'll often remember just the long days out sampling on the river, the last minute samples that would come in at the worst possible time, or the weekends spent in the lab counting fish and Daphnia. He'll be my strongest advocate and supporter. He'll be my very best friend and my wonderful husband. So I thought I had a pretty good foundation from my experience with Alloway. And soon I pretty much decided I wanted to work for the Ohio EPA in Columbus. And they rejected me quite a bit. But that's okay, because instead I was hired by the City of Columbus Division of Water into the Water Quality Assurance Laboratory, Biological and Environmental Research Section in 1999. And with this position, I was to learn the ins and outs of drinking water rules. I started out focused on the total coliform rule, sampling and testing for it in the distribution system. And soon, I also got into the plants, sampling different parts of the treatment train from raw to finished. I was determining the removal efficiency of Cryptosporidium, Giardia, and spore-forming bacteria. This section was also the lead in navigating the city through the surface water treatment rules and all its adaptations. That's finally the current long-term 2 enhanced surface water treatment rule. So I was in the biological and environmental section for 10 years. And during that time, I quietly learned a lot about the City of Columbus drinking water system. I obtained my Water Operator 2 license, and I continue to support the overall mission to provide clean drinking water for the citizens of Columbus. I was a good employee. I think I did everything I was supposed to, and I think I did it well. But when an opportunity for a promotion to a Water Research Analyst 2 became available, I was not selected. This was a splash of cold water that got my attention. The question is why? So I think when you work for a bigger organization like Columbus, it can be very easy to just do the job you are hired to do. You don't have to be noticed. Just keep your head down and get the work done, looking for that 30 years and out. The problem with keeping my head down was that when I looked up, people just didn't know me. Like I said, I think I did everything I was supposed to, but then again, so were lots of people. I wasn't really exploring the possibilities that my position could provide. I didn't look for meaningful ways to contribute. I was just doing what was asked of me. I'd become complacent. So I guess this is where I decided I needed to change my perspective and started asking myself questions. I could keep doing what I was doing or just try to experience what opportunities Columbus could offer me. I asked to transfer into the water treatment research section, volunteered to help with tours of the Dublin Rd water plant, took on studies looking at water age and treatment issues. The plants were on the cusp of ozone, biological active filters, and ion exchange. Columbus was not lacking in rehabs, upgrades, or projects. So with all these projects, I've had the opportunity to see and experience some pretty cool things within the Columbus water system. So here, I'm pictured standing inside of the Dublin Rd water plant, 1908 clear well, which holds over 18 million gallons of finished drinking water when it's in service. At the time that I was walking through this clear well, It hadn't been open for 100 years, and now it probably won't be again for another 100. I've stood in the middle of the Doubt Reservoir when it was under construction. This upground reservoir has its perimeter sidewalls that are 5 miles around. I was standing in a spot knowing that it would soon be under 9.3 billion gallons of water. This seemed pretty unbelievable at the time. And in the pictures below, we're grabbing samples as part of tank profiling for water quality in the distribution system and filter coring to evaluate the new biological filters at the plants. So while doing water quality profiles on the water tanks, I also had the opportunity to climb several water towers throughout the city. So I'm not a thrill seeker, and I don't love heights or ladders, but I am open to challenging myself. And so climbing a 100-foot vertical ladder to the very top of a water tower that holds 1 million gallons of finished drinking water, that was my challenge. So as I was climbing that ladder inside the tank, it was Matt Steele who was in front of me. He kept telling me I was almost there, 10 more feet. Just keep climbing. Rest if you need to, but just keep going. You got this. Well, here I am. I'm standing on top of the water tower above the city. And I've got to say, this would be a change of perspective. So that day, long ago, Matt was the one who came to me, and he was the one that told me that I did not get that first promotion. He didn't leave it to a phone call from HR or rumors of who did or didn't get the job. He witnessed all of my disappointment, and he hesitantly told me why I fell short. So that honest truth, that pushed me to recognize that I was not engaged, not as engaged as I could be. And there was more to learning than just the bugs in the lab. A few years later, he would also be the one that would tell me that I was selected as a supervisor of the water treatment research section. So it took me a while to figure out, but getting involved, it really helped me get connected with the water industry and the community around me. So while I was at Columbus, I was a part of PUMP, which stands for Public Utilities Mentoring Program. I participated first as a mentee and then as a mentor in the program. I was on the first Diversity and Inclusion Committee for Columbus DPU. We looked at metrics and ways to measure or show improvement on DI efforts. I also got more involved in the community. I chaired my kids' Cub Scout pack, and I helped organize cleanups and volunteer work with the kids. So through Ohio AWWA's Philanthropic Committee, I got involved with Water for People and the Race for Global Water. At the time, I was looking for something I could just support that was around Columbus that showcased the importance of water access and challenges. So this issue became really important to me when I experienced the lack of reliable water during a trip back to Vietnam with my mom in 2010. I went back to the house where my mom grew up with my grandmother. Now my aunt's living there. I knew a well had been dug at this house back in the 90s, but when my mom was a child, she always had to bring water back from the river for use. I also spent time in Rakia, which is now a city of 250,000 people, and it had its own water treatment and distribution system. But while in Rakia, I was explicitly cautioned to avoid consuming any water or ice because no one trusted the government-run utility. There would be frequent water pressure issues and rolling power outages, or just a lack of water to the higher floors of the buildings. I was really surprised to find that even with a well at my grandmother's house, water was still being stored in big clay pots outside. Inside the house, I couldn't just flush the toilet. I had to pour water to it first. We also didn't have running water in the kitchen for cooking and cleaning. So there was one day, in an effort to help with chores, I was outside doing the dishes for my aunt and noticed a fish was in one of the clay pots, and I pointed it out. I wanted to get the fish out and clean the vessel. My aunt stopped me before I could dump the water, saying that the fish was helping the water. They were eating the little bugs. So I looked in the other container, and there were mosquito larvae wiggling all around. The fish had died, and my aunt didn't have time to replace it yet. So there it was. I was utterly speechless, realizing I was drinking out of and eating off the dishes washed in fish-treated water. I'm pretty sure they weren't licensed. Needless to say, I got sick on that trip, even though I thought I knew enough to be careful. So being in Ohio, I don't think a lot of people think about water scarcity until they don't have it coming out of their taps. There weren't many water outages or restrictions around here. Water challenges seems to be the utilities problem to figure out. And water is abundant with the Great Lakes, the Ohio River, and all the streams running across Ohio. After my experience, I felt compelled to do what little I could to help reduce this problem globally. And in 2012, Michelle Gilkerson and I attended the Race for Global Water in Cincinnati. And from then, I was determined that we needed to bring a sister event to Columbus. Tim McClellan from the Cincinnati race was very supportive and even gave us the logo to adopt that year. I met Afaf Musa and Alicia Adams of OWEA, who they both had the same passion to make a difference in the global water issue. With our drive, we recruited Stephanie Johnson, Hunter Kelly, Dick Lorenz, Summer Hawkins, Cindy Jacobsons, and I know I'm missing a whole slew of people, and I'm sorry. So with the support of Columbus DPU and the help of all these people and many more, on October 3rd, 2015, we held our first Columbus Race for Global Water 5K at Hoover Reservoir. So this has become such an important part of my career. I look forward to the event every year. I love seeing the families that come out and meeting people who are not part of the water industry, but they discovered the race because they just felt it was an important cause. I get to work with really great people. Afaf, still as passionate as ever, and Jean, who is instrumental in furthering the event to Cleveland. If the race committee is out there, you know how great you are. And these races didn't make it across Ohio without the teamwork and support of everyone that's involved. So I'm very happy to say that I've been supporting the Water for People cause for almost half my career now. Water for People is a nonprofit organization that works globally to create sustainable, lasting water and wastewater systems in communities that don't have reliable water access. To me, Water for People is an approach I can get behind. Water and sanitation solutions as a holistic approach to the development of the community. Water for People establishes a partnership with the communities and buy-in from the leaders. Materials and equipment, they're sourced within the area as much as possible to ensure that future maintenance and issues can be repaired locally. Residents would be trained with skills to run and upkeep the system. Children and adults are educated on the importance of water sanitation and hygiene practices. And Water for People, they commit to 10 years of monitoring and helping the community run and maintain the system as they transition into autonomy. So it would be a lasting solution for generations to come. It's not a dig it and forget it solution, but a long-term effort to solving the community's water and sanitation problem. I'm super excited that 2024 will be the 10th year for the Columbus Race for Global Water 5K. We have a date set for Saturday, October 5th, and we'll again be starting at the top of the dam at Hoover Reservoir. But if you can't make it to that one, I hope you can make it to one of the sister races in Cincinnati in August or Cleveland in October. The backdrop for all three of these races, they highlight the water industry and the water resources around Ohio. Okay, so I just had to get my little plug in there, and now we return to our regular scheduled programming. So in 2015, I obtained my Water Operator 3 license. And at the time, as a supervisor of the water treatment research section, I wanted to obtain that licensing. But this would then later set me up for the opportunity in 2017 to move to a shift supervisor position in operations. So it's not a secret that the industry has a growing need for licensed operators, and succession planning for higher level management positions, it's essential. Columbus has had at the time several water plant operator positions open 2 at Dublin Rd Water Plant and 1 at the Hap Cremean Water Plant. So I was offered the job as the water plant operator 2 at the Dublin Rd Water Plant. It wasn't the most traditional move, but I knew I needed another change of perspective after 18 years as a water research analyst in the Water Quality Assurance Laboratory. This would also give me the opportunity to obtain my Class 4 license when I was ready. I was looking for something that would promote my curiosity and keep me on a path of continued learning and growing. I was excited to go to the plants. So I hadn't made a change like this in 18 years. And for me, it was interesting to run process control tests. I was able to use my results immediately to make decisions on treatment process changes, and not just compile these results to be reported out later. So working as an operator, it was different because I never knew what I was walking into when I reported to work. Each shift would be a new learning experience. And that's what I'm calling the heart-thumping, fly out of your seat, unexpected situations that the plant can present to you on an otherwise quiet shift. So if you've never experienced an 80 million gallons per day plant lose power, well, it's an experience. The first time you hear a big boom and the lights go out, you realize everything that you know or think you know about the plant, it's about to be tested. Not only is the darkness jarring, but so is your wit. Staying calm is crucial. I once had a dumpster catch fire in the rain because a delivery driver had dumped excess lime in there without our knowledge. Another time, I detected an odd odor in the coagulation basin. Come to find out, a business upstream was leaking something into the river, and it got into the intake. I've gotten to operate the gates at Hoover Dam to prevent homes from flooding, and I've hunted down mystery leaks for all the chemical systems. I learned early on to respect the plants. It humbled me pretty quickly. So my first time as the only supervisor on shift resulted in an imbalance of alkalinity through the lime softening process, creating turbidity issues through 4 settling basins, which is approximately 5.4 million gallons of water per basin. One of the projects I worked on as a water research analyst was to evaluate settling and filter aid polymer for surface and groundwater systems. Luckily for me, Dublin Rd Water Plant installed this polymer system, and that would be my best tool to improving my 20 million gallon turbidity problem that was flowing through the plant. I don't have enough time to go over all the ways that a plant will teach an operator, but that was what I was looking for, opportunities to learn and grow. And I would certainly say that the Dublin Rd Water Plant and the Hap Cremean Water Plant brought it in a big way. I think I learned something new every day while operating, but I also faced challenges that were new to me, or maybe it was just more obvious. So going from the position in the lab, that was a pretty traditional schedule, Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 4 p.m. It was an adjustment to work and off shift. I was giving up my weekends and holidays and knew I would have to work an occasional overtime because of the 7 days, 24-hour operation. I started off on a swing shift, which is a combination of second and third shift. It wasn't great, and I realized I didn't perform at my best on third shift. I guess after years of actually sleeping at night, it would take time to adjust to a schedule like that. I quickly was able to move into second shift, and there I stayed for the majority of my time at the plants. It was a good compromise. It was a good compromise where I felt like I could do my job and still slept regularly, but it certainly caused more adjustments on the home front. Second shift is not a family-friendly shift. So many years ago, right after getting my operator license, I actually applied for an operator position at the Dublin Rd Water Plant. I didn't get an interview. I did, however, have a conversation with the operations manager at the time. He was quite a nice guy and just wanted to let me know how difficult shift work was. It was hard on a family. And he thought I might not find operations to be a very good fit, and especially if I wanted to start a family. This may or may not be true, and I think it depends on the individual. And that's a choice for them to make. I guess I remember this because here I am in operations, and I do believe he didn't know my situation or how I would balance work and life. But ultimately, that was for me and my family to figure out. And I figured it out. So Jeff was a champ with the kids. He was involved in all the ways that I couldn't be. He attended so many more events than I did during this time. He went to every soccer game, track meet, concert, or meeting. My boys were so understanding of my schedule. They adjusted as they needed to. They took on cooking one night a week, learned to do their own laundry, and they just got more independent. I also think that the three of them ultimately got closer because together they figured it out. They figured out what they needed to do without me. I attended everything that I was able to. I don't think I missed any of the big stuff. We certainly adjusted some birthday and holiday celebrations, but we celebrated. We took vacations. It was just planned a lot earlier to accommodate plant coverage. I was just there. I was there to teach my boys how to drive. I got pictures of homecoming, prom, and graduation. I had to have family support with this because I knew I couldn't do it alone to make this role work. So I was at the Hap Cremean Water Plant during the time of the COVID pandemic, and it was weird. So it was weird when you don't see any other cars on the road when driving to work. It was weird. When I only had one other person on shift and we didn't see each other, we just did the work separately or staggered. It was weird to not greet the person coming in to relieve your shift or say goodbye when departing. Maybe I'm too formal or sentimental, but those little gestures and connections, that they were lacking, and that really bothered me. And I can't say my time at Hap Cremean is as bright as the rainbows over the basins there. It's really interesting. Each plant, or even each place you work, it has a different personality, a feel, or a culture, all its own. I never really felt like I fit well at Hap Cremean, and it's something I never really figured out. I enjoyed my time there for the experience that I got, and there's so many great people who work there, but things sometimes just aren't a perfect fit for everyone, which is probably why we all like to work, play, and do different things. I'm glad of my time there, but I was also glad that Beth and Scott were willing to take me back to Dublin Rd Water Plant when I asked. So I wish I could say I had some grand plan up my sleeve that got me to the Delaware County Regional Sewer District, but I can't. I had just transferred back to Dublin Rd, and I had no plans of moving on. And then this happened. If it wasn't for the urging of my husband and my own curiosity, I'm not sure I would have even applied. I think he knew from our Alloway days that overseeing a lab and working with NPDES permits were very much up my alley. This is the first position that I didn't actively seek out, but when I found it, it seemed like an opportunity that I've always been working towards. I never thought I would be working with wastewater again. After all, I was a drinking water gal. But actually, if I'm being honest, I'm really a lab girl and an operator, a 5K organizer, a tank climber, a bug and fish counter, a gardener, and now I get to say I'm a wastewater gal. So here it is. This is my very first day at Delaware County Regional Sewer District. So I like to think that the party that they had on that day, it was a welcome party for me, but it was actually a groundbreaking event for OECC, the Olentangy Environmental Control Center upgrade project. One thing I can say, though, is that Delaware County definitely started me off with a shovel in hand. And that's okay, because I know that there's work to be done there. Here. As one of the fastest growing counties in Ohio, the district is going to see some challenges and changes. Delaware County has 9 treatment facilities. The largest plants are the Alum Creek Reclamation Facility and Olentangy Environmental Control Center, where our 3 chemists work in 2 labs to process the required samples for 9 different permits. So we just completed a 3rd lab at the northernmost plant of the district, and we'll be integrating that into the lab program. Like I said, OECC is undergoing a pretty extensive upgrade right now, and the lab has been an important piece. They've been processing extra samples, particularly ammonia and phosphorus, because of all the upsets that's been disrupting the plant. So I hope that my prior experience will be helpful to the district as the plant goes through the needed changes and upgrades. In my other role as pretreatment manager, that has been a challenge I didn't know that I needed because I'm fairly new to pretreatment rules and regulations. The sewer district monitors the industries in our system for pollutants to help protect the treatment process and the receiving waters. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I've just never been in the role of regulator or enforcer. Since I've been with the district, I've seen firsthand now how important this role can be. We had an incident where oil was dumped into the collection system upstream of the Alum Creek plant, and the influent flowing into the plant was as black as tar. The air smelled of petroleum, and the aeration tanks were going to have some major problems if the bugs were killed off from this. I've never really had to think about what happens to a plant in this scenario. You slow down the plant, then you throw every tool in the treatment toolbox at it. Or you shut down the intake to allow the pollutant to flow right past, right? My first thought was, can't we shut off the influent flow? Well, that's not an option because that would then back up people's homes, and nobody wants that. Alternately, if this black water didn't get handled by the plant, then it'll flow right into the river. So I can see how my role to proactively protect the collection system prior to the plant would be so important. And I hope to keep improving on this program that already exists. I'm still learning something new every day. And now I get to work for my community with a small team here in Delaware County. And I say that quite literally, because that's how the group treats each other. And the district is in my backyard. I feel like I've come full circle from my days at Alloway, and I can truly say the journey, it has been good. So why water? Why I would choose to work in water is because I can't think of a better industry to be in to make a positive impact on people and communities. Whether it's treating drinking water or wastewater, water is a vital resource that everyone wants, needs, and deserves. Water has to be protected and valued. Water, it aligns with my sense of service to people and the environment. I hope that the work that we all do in water will leave the world a better place for the future. So I like to think of this less as professional advice, but maybe more as reference material that can be referred back to as needed for a lot of aspects of our lives. So I try to always remember to keep learning. I wish I could tell my younger self who is focused on numbers and lab results to climb that water tower and get out there. Be flexible. Delaware County Regional Sewer District, it wasn't in the plan, but it's a really good plan moving forward. Remember, connections are important. The race for global water has spanned across Ohio. And that's only because of all the people that's worked together and they support each other for this one great cause. This slide, I feel like it sums it all up for me. People matter. I've reflected on lots of people who have seen me and my career grow and change, but it doesn't really capture everyone who have made a difference to me. You all know who you are. You're out there. I know that you're supporting me right now, even with this, all the technical difficulties and all that I've had. I know that you're still supporting me. And I hope please know that my journey, it's only been more interesting because of everyone who has been a part of it. One thing I've noticed in my career and in my experience is that the water industry, it's smaller than you think. And support continues no matter which end of the pipe you're working. Remember to accept the hand that reaches out to help. And don't forget to extend your other hand towards the other person. I'd like to conclude with a quote someone said to me once. Unfortunately, I don't know who to cite, but it had really spoken to me, and I find it to be a true tribute in my case. My success is a compilation of all those who've helped me along the way. And for that reason, I accept it humbly. So I'd like to thank everyone for listening to my story and for taking your time out tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story, Vic. I really loved hearing about like your kind of early career perspective shift and looking like reaching more for challenging yourself. I think probably in the interest of everybody's evening, if anyone has any questions that they would be willing to ask, like unmute themselves and ask. Otherwise, I think we may be adjourning without questions. Since I started this off late. Did we have any questions from the team? Okay. Awesome. I think so. I think with that, I'll
Thanks
let
everybody for not putting me on the spot.
and yeah, really good presentation, Vic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.